that much worse. But of course, from the Austrian perspective, you can see where we're coming from to say that's not a mystery, that's not shocking that when they sucked all that money in terms of extra government borrowing, that the economy all of a sudden got worse than people realized at the time. So that's the Austrian perspective. As far as his proposals, let me just give you an analogy. I think I got about 1 minute left in this segment of the reply here. Let me just give you an analogy. Obviously, we've got different people in here. Some of you have read his book inside and out. Some of you are very new to this. So let me just walk you through in terms of his perspective and where he's coming from. It's not that I think the stuff in his book is wrong necessarily, and some of it I actually agree with wholeheartedly, but a lot of the stuff that I think he's saying is technically correct, but it's very misleading, or even more to the point, somebody might erroneously conclude from what he says that's technically true something that's the wrong thing to do. So let me give you this analogy. There's a wife and a husband sitting at the table. They're looking at the family budget, and she's just like, you know what, honey, our expenses, we cut this, we cut that. I need to go take a second job. That's the only way we can make ends meet. And he has an epiphany. He goes, no. I'm just going to put on a ski mask and go down and start holding up liquor stores. You know, we're not constrained by our budget anymore. And she says, what, are you insane? You keep doing that. You push that too much, that policy, and you're going to end up in prison. And he goes, okay, you're right, but I just want us to focus on the real constraint here. It's not about our budget. It's about me going to prison. So let's just at least now that we're thinking clearly about the things constraining our behavior and our spending. Okay, so is what the husband there said wrong? Well, technically, no. He's right. That really the ultimate thing stopping you from spending too much is that you go to prison if you're holding up liquor stores, not that you need to get a job and get income. But you can see how, in my mind, at best, he has provided a distraction, and at worst, he's going to justify more spending than they really can afford and do something that would be even worse than running up your credit card to go hold up liquor stores. So that's when I take Warren to be saying, Social Security's not in crisis, what are you kidding me? We just run the printing press. Duh. That, to me, he's not helping, and in fact, if he's encouraging people to spend more, the politicians to spend more than they otherwise would, I actually think that's a very dangerous thing, and inflation is arguably a worse cure than even taxing and where we see where the money's coming and going.
Warren, I'm going to, we're up to the moderator's questions now, and my first question is going to be, are you robbing liquor stores? How do you respond?
Well, what we have to look at is the difference between the issuer and the user of anything. So I'm going to use an example of subway tokens. Am I dating myself? How long has it been since the city had subway tokens?
At least a decade.
That's when I used to live here, when I was at Bankers Trust. So did everybody remember how subway tokens work? Yes, okay. And so if you go down to the train station and you bring somebody to New York, they say, oh, I see how it works. First, they collect the tokens and then they sell them. And I go, yeah, I know it looks like that, but no, really, they sell them first and then they collect them. Well, how do you know that? They're just going around and around. Well, you know that they're the issuer of the subway token where they sell them first and then they collect them. And if you look at the city can't collect its tokens until after it gets them out there. The issuer of anything can't collect anything until after it gets it out there. The rest of us, we can't use tokens until we have to buy them first, get them, exchange dollars for tokens before we can spend them. The city has to exchange tokens for dollars before they can collect them. Okay? Likewise, with the U.S. dollar, the U.S. government is the issuer of the U.S. dollar in this sense. Now, I know there are all these definitions floating around. The dollars that can be used to pay taxes come only from the U.S. government, or they're counterfeit. And technically speaking, a tax payment is a reserve drain on the bank. It's inside money. It's a debit to their reserve account. Only the Fed can add reserves that can then get debited, either directly or through an overdraft or through some other way. But because you're the issuer of the dollar, think of it, if you've got $1 in your pocket, how did it get there if it's not counterfeit? The government spent it. It came from the government. It can't come from anywhere else. And the government hasn't taxed it yet, or you wouldn't have it. Now, I know it's a little bit simplistic because there's government lending, but we're just trying to focus on this one point. All right, and so the point here is there's a dramatic difference between the issuer and the user. So if New York City owed me $5 million, I'd be a lot more worried about their ability to pay me than if they owed me 5 million subway tokens. All right, I'm pretty sure they'd be able to get me the tokens.
Warren, you should check out Metro cards because they, in some ways, make your point even better. You could ask, where does the city get the credits that it puts on your Metro cards for rides?
Right,
And
right.
the answer is it doesn't get them from anywhere.
Right. And you've got to get credits before you can ride.
Right,
the train.
but the subway system doesn't need
They
to
can't-
obtain the credits from anybody.
Right, but neither can they debit your credits until after they've given them to you. So the user has to get the thing first before he can use it. That's all of us with dollars. That's the states, the corporations, individuals. We all have to get dollars to be able to spend or our checks bounce, exactly like Professor Murphy was saying. The government, on the other hand, is in the opposite position. It has to spend them first or lend them first before it can collect them. And the way they say it inside, the insiders say it, is you can't have a reserve drain without a reserve add. And in the old days, before all the excess reserves were there, when the Treasury was borrowing, the Fed was in doing repos. They got to add the reserves before they can subtract them. You got to spend first before you can collect. It's just point of logic.
Bob, what do you, I mean, do you want to respond to that? A lot of Austrians would say
Again,
that government spending is disastrous, but Warren's making the point that the government needs to spend for dollars to enter the system.
Well, I'm not.
Well, sorry.
Okay.
I'm saying it can't collect them until after
Right,
it spends
it cannot collect them until after it's
it
spent.
spends them. And that's the difference. That's why a household gets in trouble, because they have to collect first before they can spend. The U.S. can't be in that position with a floating exchange rate currency. Now, on a gold standard, which was the context of the original Austrian writings, yes. If the government spends and doesn't tax, it runs out of gold, it defaults, and the system's is in default. Okay, and you wind up devaluing, and it's a disaster. Which is what happened in Argentina, which happens in all of Russia in '98, all the fixed exchange rate blow-ups where the money was backed by reserves, and the government put themselves in a similar position where they have to collect first before they can spend. The European governments used to be in a position where Greece would spend drachma first and then collect it. They never had a solvency problem. They turned themselves into what are like U.S. states, where now they have to get euro before they can spend them. They got a major solvency problem. The European Central Bank spent €1 trillion last month or whenever it was. Nobody asked, where did you get it? Did you borrow it from China or did you tax it? All they did was credit their accounts and their books. Now, can excess spending, excess demand drive the
Wait,
prices?
let's
Okay, sorry.
before you anticipate all his answers, let's try to.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, I'll make a few points just on this one little issue. So first of all, John said to Warren, are you in favor of robbing liquor stores? And he didn't deny it. I just want to, and I think there's been oversight, but just wanted as a point of order in the debate.
We have a Fifth Amendment.
Yeah. Look, there's a lot we could get into, and this is really, I think, going to be the crux of it. So, and I have some questions that I'm going to bring up later in the debate when he and I talk to each other. I'll say that as far as the analogy of the subway tokens, let me, for one thing, if the government came in and monopolized subway provision, or they could do it with food also, and the government came in and said it's illegal for anyone else to buy or sell food unless you get these coupons from us, and he could walk through the logic there, and that would not be a good system. So by the same token, if at best I would say, if he's showing, look, given that the government's going to monopolize the supply of money, all of my things follow, I would say still that's not a good system, because I don't think the government should be in the business of producing money. Right?
Okay.
Most of us agree